Hello and welcome to Joyride with your hosts, the metaphysical moms, Tiffany and Carrie. Joyride takes you on a spin through all things spiritual and soulful, including holistic healing, energy work, and personal development. Now, here are your hosts, Tiffany and Carrie.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Joyride Show.
Hi, we're the Metaphysical Moms. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Carrie.
And we have another incredible show for you today because we have a new friend we want to introduce you to.
Yes. Okay, first I have to tell you, it's like, what do you get when you cross an scientist, inventor, artist, channeler, contactee? I mean, the list goes on and on. What do you get?
You get Cole.
You get Cole. Hi, Cole.
Hi, Cole. Welcome to Joyride.
So Allison called us and said, you have to talk to this man, this incredible man. I think that you will just be blown away by this. So Allison Coe, for those of you that know, I mean, everybody really knows who she is, QHHT practitioner. And I understand that she met with you and things have just blasted off even from where you were to that point. Right? Kind of fuel on fire.
Yeah, but let's get a little backstory so that we can introduce our Joy Tribe to you, because you take things very scientifically, very pragmatically. You're obviously very intelligent and, grounded, but you have this contact and these experiences, and then you're actually creating something completely new, a new technology, new ideas, and you're able to apply both together, and that's so exciting. So we wanted to introduce you to our Joy Tribe so that they could kind of see the possibilities, see what's out there and the information you're getting. And so maybe tell us a little of your backstory just to kind of get us situated on how you got here, because right now you're a scientist at a technology company, and but you weren't all there. You didn't start there.
No, yeah. So I grew up with hippie parents and just kind of experienced all the rock and roll and fun that sort of provides. A lot of being dumped off at aunts and uncles and grandma's house because parents were having too much fun to deal with me and my sister. About in like 1976 I saw a UFO, which I think kind of changed my perspective a lot.
But you were about 7, right? You were young.
Yeah, I was 7 years old. And it was very, very strange. I was out in the desert and I saw this thing flying right at the mountain line, and it was just kind of cruising towards me. And I was like, okay, it looks like an airplane, but there's no wings. So it was just kind of like the tube.
Yeah.
And it was flying over and over and over. It was going super slow. And I was like, there's no way that thing could be going that slow. So I went and got my dad's binoculars. When I did that, being a 7-year-old, my mom was like, what are you doing with your dad's binoculars? So she followed me outside, and we watched it fly over like Big Bear Mountain, and then it kind of went to land, and then something shot out and just zipped away. It's almost like something came out of it and zipped off. And then I was like, okay, something's going on, And then that was just in my mind the whole time. My uncle was the only one in my family who was an engineer. My dad was a psychiatrist, but so he was the only one that was an engineer where I could say, okay, well, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could try that. But I pretty much fell into, I was in a band and I was a break dancer and I was on TV and I was doing all kinds of crazy youngster stuff. And I was also designing clothes for friends at school because I was kind of really hipster and used to have a lot of parties because my parents got a divorce when I was 15. I spent 3 years sort of on my own, taking care of myself and having a lot of fun. And it was 1985, so we're talking, Spicoli type stuff.
Right.
And then it got to the point where I was going to graduate, and I was all set up to go to FIDM, which is this Fashion Institute Design college, I guess. And I got accepted and everything, but then I just was kind of like, got too much on my own, and I just realized I couldn't do it. And then my uncle, who was an engineer, he sent his daughter out to try to find me. And so she found me at some party, and she's like, yeah, why haven't you come by or talk to us? And I was like, I'm out here doing my thing. And then she's like, well, my dad says you can come and live with us if you get a job and you go to school. So I was like, oh, okay. Because at that point I was just kind of like, I was out there, man. And anyway, so I just said, okay, let me try it. So I went over there and he's like, yeah, you can do that. So what do you want to study? And I was like, well, if I'm going to go through all this pain and agony and go back to school, then I'm going to study something, one of the sciences. So I just took everything. You know, I ended up graduating with 400 basically science units, which only takes like 160 to get a degree. But I just studied everything. I just wanted to know where I belong because I didn't really know. And I was in a physics class one day and I was watching electromagnetic spectrum of a light traveling through a vacuum. And I don't know why, but it affected me in my physics class. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to be a physicist. That's what I'm going to do. And my teacher's like, no, you probably shouldn't do that. It's really hard. And I was like, no, I'm going to be able to do it. And everybody told me, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that. You know, you're going to end up dropping out, because I had some friends that dropped out of school. So they were just telling me their experiences. But yeah, I was able to do it. It was no problem really. And the only thing was, and then when I was 22 years old, I built fusion, basically a fusion reactor with this professor that came from Russia. There was an exchange program where during the SDI years, the later part of it, where Russians were coming over and we were sending scientists over there. So I knew the scientist that was over there, and this Russian guy came over. He was the right-hand man for the Supreme Commander of Russian Science Confederation when he was there. And he had this totally different way of doing things. Everything was very manual. I was like, well, where's the science? He's like, well, that'll come later. Let's just grab this piece of hardware and this piece of hardware. And he would just put things together, and I would work with him and argue with him. And when it came time, we made this device that would make tritium and send it to a self collider that my other professor had made. And he was sort of the one running the whole thing. This guy, Norman Rostocker, who's now passed away. And so we did that. And then after that, I felt like I graduated and everything. And I was like, okay, I don't really feel like I learned how to make that UFO, you know, like I studied everything and I'm not picking up on, you know, what I'm really supposed to do. I could have worked for Edwards Air Force Base at the time, but just wasn't really economically feasible for me. So I decided to pursue other things, and I ended up working with this company that made megasonic equipment, basically RF equipment, and sent it into crystals, and had all these various different research programs. The guy came from Bell Labs, and I worked with him for many, many years. And it's weird because it's all sort of coming around now that I'm working on this orb thing, because it has to do with water and crystals, and you know, it has light and plasma, which is more like what I studied. But it sort of feels right. It feels like it's, I don't know, somehow all come to this one point.
Well, let's talk about the orb thing that you're working on, because you're doing this on the side. I mean, you have a full-time job at a technology company, but you're doing this development on the side and we'll post some videos or send some links to your website that shows where you are in the progress of it. But see if you can tell us the kind of a snapshot of what this orb thing is that you're developing and why it's useful and how it's going to help you build that UFO.
Exactly.
Okay. So, a long time ago, maybe about 10 years ago or more, they started talking about the changes in the sun. And so I was kind of listening, you know, maybe with one ear, and I heard somebody talk. This kind of happened when I was in school too, just to go backwards for 1 second. I was watching this CNN, and this guy was working on this plasma device at NASA. And I was just a high school kid at the time. And I saw it and I was like, oh, that's interesting, because, you know, I was interested in propulsion and stuff. And so I called him up and I said, hey, how do I get that kind of job? What do I do? And he was really instrumental in my everything that I chose at school. He basically said, study everything, which is what I did. And, you know, go talk to your professors and work for them, which is what I did. But it was interesting because he's like, how do you know how'd you get a hold of me? And I said, well, I saw you on the CNN. He's like, yeah, but how'd you get my phone number? I said, I called information. and he's like, okay, you're the only person that's called me. And it's been like months since I did that show. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm meant to have talked to you then. So anyway, so I had heard this thing on CNN again about the sun. And I was like, okay, let's listen to what they're saying. And they were saying that the material coming into the sun was different now as we're kind of moving out of the old, where we were before, and moving into this new area of the solar system or space. And he had said that there were these ice chunks with iron were coming before, and they were creating certain types of solar flares or certain types of energetics. And now we're going to this new area where that seems to have changed, and we're getting more sort of like precious metals in ice, and it's hitting it, it's changing the way that the sun reacts, quieting it down a lot. But then you get these really massive solar flares that are coming out every once in a while. And so then I was like, okay, let's try and figure that out. So I started playing around with that concept, and that's where I started getting these excited energetics that were coming out, light energies were coming out of working with these water and these precious metals. Basically, you're looking at like silver, platinum, tungsten. There's actually people that are using tungsten, this basically same process, oxidizing tungsten, and they're using it for, it's called extreme UV, to pattern semiconductor chips. And so they have people are doing that all the time. This is a little bit different because it's not melted. It's not a melted metal. It's more like a nano metal explosions. So anyway, that's how it kind of started. And now, since then, I started going, okay, well, what can I do with this? What is this going to do? Originally, I wanted to make maybe some type of power device out of it. I've gotten some clues that maybe I might want to wait on that. And then I started looking at, okay, maybe I could use it to generate a bunch of hydrogen and sort of create a floaty craft or something. And then I got some more clues that that's something I shouldn't do right now. So, but I still worked on it in my garage, all kinds of other stuff. Like there was some airplanes that flew over my house one day, and it kind of triggered me because they were spraying out a bunch of, smoke out the back, white chemicals or something. I got really mad because as soon as it came over my house and then went a little bit further, there were 3 planes. They immediately shut it off and flew over the ocean. And I was like, you sons of bitches, So it kind of pissed me off. So I started working on some sort of negative stuff with this application. And anyway, so I started going to psychics and stuff, trying to figure out, maybe I can get a clue as to what I'm supposed to do. Because I have a mentor who's from this Lost Teachings of Atlantis, where I studied a lot of my meditation practices, this kind of stuff I do now. And she was like, you really need to be looking at what's the best for, humanity on this. You shouldn't just like go off and just start making the first thing that comes to your mind. So, but she didn't have anything else to say about that. So I was like, all right, I need to kind of explore on my own. So I talked to a bunch of different psychics, and they're just all really encouraging me to make a power device, which, I may do, but I just felt like, okay, I've already kind of worked on something like that and end up kind of being I was stopped, let's just say. And so I feel like, okay, they don't want me to do that. I have friends that are all over the place, in various different fields, including people that come from government that I've interacted with. And whenever I talk to them, I get hit by something that stops me in my tracks.
So after you talk to them and you let them know what you're up to, and then something kind of blocks it after that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a pretty big clue that I shouldn't, if I do that, I'm going to be maybe, in trouble.
Okay, so let's back up just so that I'm clear. So you have this idea and you're not really sure what to apply it to, but you know that somehow this is an integral part of, like, it's a path, it's a stone on your path. And so you're coming up, you're experimenting with these different things. So then you're wanting to know how to apply it or what your next step is. So that's why you're trying to seek advice from the other side. Yes?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's how you got introduced to Allison Coe for QHHT, correct?
How did you find her?
Well, yeah, that was the thing, is that, so I had seen her on YouTube, and I was kind of, oh, this is kind of interesting. And, I had a very strong feeling like, oh, I should do something. Excuse me. I should try to contact this person. And then I looked on her website, and she was all booked up. So I was like, okay. And then I just kind of went off on my life for a while, and then contacted some psychics, and they just told me, you're going to be incredibly successful. I can just, I can tell, and all these things. And I was like, okay, that's great. And every time, so like I would have, like if I was approaching a time when I would talk to a psychic, I would have these visions like, okay, this is what you should be doing. And then I would get in contact with them, and they would just sort of reaffirm that. So then I'd just keep working. And I tell you that when you see this light that comes off of this thing, it's like, it gave me a feeling like, you have to do this. You have to work on this.
Yeah, well, tell us about the feeling of the orb, right?
Because I know the feeling I get when I watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it's not an orb yet. So that's what came out of Allison's my session with Allison. But at first, it was just this flashy light that looked really sci-fi. So I was like, okay, this is a sci-fi light. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. So I got it to the point where I did a really basic example on a foil. And I went over to a scientist that I know that's been in these plasma projects for the government for like 40 years. And I said, hey, look, have you ever seen anything like this in your entire life? And he looked at it, and he goes, Cole, I've never seen anything like that. You need, and because I had approached him, because actually I was thinking about, I had like 9 different ideas on how to make like a UFO, right? So I went to him, and I was like, wanted to talk to him about that stuff. And so I kind of mentioned, that I would like to create this group where we kind of collaborate and trying to figure out how to, make some kind of flying device or craft. And he's like, oh, okay, whatever. We're having some wine. And then I said, hey, by the way, here's this experiment I was doing. Have you ever seen anything like it? And he looked at it, and he goes, no, never seen anything like it. This is what you need to work on. Forget about everything else that you're thinking about. This is it. And I was like, okay, not really totally 100% believing in it at that point. I knew it was special, but I was still have all these other ideas. It's just the way my mind works. And so I was still wanting to do the other things. And that's why I started going, okay, I need to talk to a psychic or somebody who can read my energy and maybe give me some clues. Anyway, that all was fine. And I was fine. I was going on my way with this propulsion device, and I was able to lift water with this technology. And then I started, after the airplanes went by, I started working on some bad stuff. But I didn't think anything wrong with it per se, because it's not like the only thing I could do was like drill through glass or something. I didn't figure it was that big of a problem yet. Anyway, so I saw Allison again on YouTube, and I was like, hey, there's something going on with this person. You need to try and contact her again. So I went immediately on her website, and there was an opening. So I chose, it was July 11th. I chose to do that. And I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Cause like, if you read some of the stuff, it's like, maybe there's something in your childhood you need to work out or whatever. And that's not where I was sort of coming from. But anyway, I just did it anyway. Cause I'm like, who knows what's going to happen? Let's just try it. So then the day of it, when we were talking, there was like a really strong connection just on the phone. It felt like. But I was like, okay, that's just your imagination. Just keep going, And then we went and did this session. And I tell you, it was absolutely incredible. I mean, I've done all kinds of, put myself out into a solar system, took myself to other solar systems, and seen incredibly crazy stuff. I might as well mention one of them because it's kind of interesting. This guy remote viewed the Greys, and he was saying that where they come from, this was after I had already done my meditation on my own. So on my meditation on my own, I went to this place where the Greys supposedly come from, and everything was kind of like quiet. There was nothing there. But the planets seemed to have been almost like a crystal. So I went there, and my essence sort of like landed on their planet, and immediately started crystallizing. I started my whole body crystallized until finally, like, there was like this red portion of myself that wouldn't crystallize. It was like fighting it, and it was kind of just like pulsing, like my heart almost. And then after a while, I was like, okay, where is this going? What's this going to do? And then eventually I felt myself die. It was like, gone, you know, it's no longer me anymore. And that little thing, that red thing, popped out at the top of my head and then was like sitting there. It was like, kind of like, there's a Star Trek movie where they have this, forget what it's called now. It's this red stuff that they put into a planet and makes it explode. I can't remember. Anyway, it's sort of like that. So there's this red thing floating above my crystallized self. And then it broke up into, I don't know, like 100 pieces, and then just went off as far as I could see into different galaxies and solar systems and stuff. And I was like, what is that all about? Anyway, so later I was watching this guy who remote viewed the Greys, and then he said their planet was a planet that had crystallized and was just this big computer, and they all got all of their instructions and information from there, which I thought was absolutely strange because I'd never heard of anything like that before. But I was like, wow, that's weird. Anyways,
what a cool experience. You actually feel yourself crystallize in that reality. And what do you think the red thing was that, because you were observing it, it wasn't you. What do you think that was?
I think it was maybe the goodness of me leaving and spreading around. I don't know.
Well, I've heard the Greys, don't have a lot of emotion. They don't have a lot of that just
Compassion,
emotional quality. They are computer almost. So
yeah.
that was that consciousness, that emotional body of yours.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Interesting. It wasn't compatible with it.
Yeah.
And so it hijacked.
It hijacked out. Yeah. That's a good.
So cool. How did that feel though, to experience that? Like,
it was amazing. It was beautiful. It was, I loved it. I mean, I was like, wow, this is awesome.
Okay, so time out. I love how it's like, yeah, I'm talking to psychics, and I'm the scientist, and I invent things, and we need to get to the part where you're an artist too, that you bring these things, you're this conduit from the other side, and it comes in, and you draw it, and then you create it. We'll get to that. But you're astral traveling, you're projecting your timeline, projecting, and it's just who you are. I mean, okay, so you started doing that at what point? Because I'm making a point here. You started doing that and exploring those different avenues at what age?
So I was probably 30, because when I was 18, I went to a 3-week session at this thing called Actualizations, which is a spinoff of EST. I don't know if you remember that, but back in the 70s, they used to have this thing called EST. It was pretty serious. You couldn't pee. And so there was a movie where a football player went there, and he had a pee thing on his leg so that he could make it through.
That was he just died. That was Smokey and
Burt Reynolds.
Yeah, I remember that. He had the boot on with his and he sat in
So they got in trouble for that, and eventually they had to spin off. They created 2 groups. One of them was Actualizations. I don't know who the other group was. So my aunt's from San Francisco, so she's like, she tried to get my dad to do it because my parents had divorced and it was all kinds of craziness going on. So she tried to get him to do it, and he's like, I ain't doing that stuff. That's crazy stuff, And then she's like, all right, let me talk to your son. So I don't know, like, what's going on? And she's like, hey, do you want to do this thing? I already paid for it. Your dad doesn't want to. And I was like, sure. So I did that. Once I did that, I was like, whoa, it was like my connection with people. I could see people. I know exactly what was going on in themselves, like if they were doing good or if they were doing bad. Had this really amazing connection. And I was like, wow, you need to figure out how to keep this, So I started meditating and just do the whole like blackout and just kind of calm and maybe some candles or whatever. I did that a little bit. But eventually I was like, I'm kind of bored of this. Like, I need something more, So, and then after I graduated through school and then started working, I realized that, okay, you have to figure this stuff on your own. You can't, like, nobody's going to tell you. And the only way I could figure was maybe there's some type of meditation that I'm missing. Like, I need to find something. So I started searching, and just was totally disappointed at the books that are out there, because you read through, all these hundreds of pages of material and there's nothing there really. I mean, there's some nice words, but it's not like, okay, here's a way to really contact your inner self better. And then I ran across this guy named John Piniel. He wrote this book called Children of the Law of One, Lost Teachings of Atlantis. When he was 16 years old, someone came on TV and they had said, come to Tibet and do this study. And he was like, what? Because he was like in a bad time in his life. And he's like, screw it, I'm going. So he went and never saw that guy again. Didn't know how he ended up on TV. But he went to Tibet, and it turned out that it was like this Atlantean monastery that was left over from a long time ago. And there was all kinds of books, pyramids, technology, and stuff. And anyway, I read through that, and in the back of the book, there's 22 meditations, and they are foreign. I mean, like when you try these things, to me, I was like completely blown away. I was like, what is this? It's like magic-y, weird stuff. And it took me a while to sort of get over that. But I started having these dreams. It was like, because basically what you do is you do this gazing and chanting. So that's really the key. The gazing and the chanting creates like a frequency in your body. And then when you go to sleep, you just have these vivid dreams. And my vivid dreams were crazy. It was like I'd be in another planet. I would be this scientist in like Greece or somewhere where it shouldn't have been. Like I've never heard of any scientist working on the kind of stuff. I was working on this one. It was like it looked like a piece of lava rock that came out of the earth. And then I had water inside of it. And then I had this disc, and I would turn this disc and it would create an electrical discharge. It would come out the back of the thing in this wire. And then there was like this, either I was a giant and there was a regular guy, or I was just a regular guy and there was a midget. But it was like this little guy was helping me, and he lived in this other, like I lived in this big house and he lived in this little thing connected to my house. It was very strange. And I was like, what is that about? Like, how's that even possible? And then it just kept getting stranger and stranger and stranger. And one of the stranger ones I had was I was the scientist in this crystal, it was like a crystal city of pyramids. And I was standing on this bluff, like, I don't know, maybe it was somewhere where people go. I could see the city down there. So then I started walking down there, and I was going to work. I had this, I don't know if you've ever seen like a Japanese engineer, technical person. They always wear an outfit and a hat. That's how they do it. That's what I was wearing. I was wearing this like engineering outfit with this hat, like if I was from Japan. And I started walking into this city, and all these pyramids all over the place. I walk into this one pyramid, and I go downstairs, and then there's another pyramid in the center of this sort of like echo chamber. And then from the top is light coming down. It's hitting the pyramid, the top of the pyramid, and then I would go around and I would move these rods underneath to sort of reflect it in different ways. And then on the sides of the pyramid, there were these cables were coming off into the walls. And that's like how they were getting their power. So I was like, this is one of the things I talked to one of these guys, these science guys that I know from the government. And I was like, yeah, this is what I'm working on. It's so weird. Like, I don't know what's happening. And anyway, he was like, oh, that's really interesting. I'd like to know more, blah, blah, blah. I got to a point where I was pretty far advanced on it. And then that night, I was in Boise, and I was hanging out with my friends at a fire pit, drinking some beer. And all of a sudden, these black helicopters start coming over the house. And they're all kidding around. Cole, they're coming after you, man. It's all that weird shit you work on. It's like, nah, they're just, they just happen to be flying by because there's probably a military base nearby here. Don't even worry about it. And anyway, so I didn't think anything of it. So then I went to work the next day. I came home. I had the office room was set up as my lab. So I had shelving in there, I had oscilloscopes, all kinds of little devices that I was working on. When I came home, it was completely destroyed. Everything was off the walls, just complete trash on the floor, and just everything was busted up. And I was like, oh my God, what the hell? And so I went and I asked my wife, I said, hey, the hell happened? She's like, what do you mean? I was like, my room was destroyed. Like, did you hear anything? She's like, well, I heard a boom, but then I didn't hear anything else. So I figured I didn't know where it came from. And I usually keep my door closed or locked. So she figured, you know, it was somewhere outside the house. And, you know, I was kind of upset, but what could you do? And the thing was, is that the stuff I was working on was broken, and I needed to do a lot more work to get it back to where it was. And I was too busy at work to do that. So that sort of kind of stopped. And that's when I started painting, because I was like, you know what, if I'm going to tell these guys stuff and they're going to come and maybe do that, because I don't know that that's really what happened, but let's say that possibly it is, then maybe I should just paint, because what can they do? Like if you're painting your dreams. So I started painting my dreams. I first was drawing everything out in a notebook. I've been doing that for years, but I just decided, okay, start painting. So I started publishing on Facebook all these crazy paintings. And the one guy that I had talked to, there was this one where I built this teleportation device. I teleported to another planet. This being had met me there and walked me over to this chair, like this galactic chair. You sit in there and it beams stuff into the top of your head. And so I posted that on Facebook, and he immediately took it and posted it to all his friends. I was like, whoa. But they couldn't, I mean, nothing happened. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm free to do this. So I just kept doing it for a while.
Anybody thinking Tesla?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when you said all that.
Yes, and okay, so, and this friend, is this a friend? I mean, is it an acquaintance? Is he still a friend?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know. I mean, he's a guy that I worked with at one of the companies that I worked for, and he had this plaque, you know, I'm this government person, blah, blah, blah. And he, you know, was really interested in me. And so we kind of have been in contact. But
so you had, in this vision, you'd built a teleportation device that was able to take you to that chair. Is that something you're trying to develop? I mean, you're trying to build UFOs and light source energies and teleportation devices. I mean, that's, wow.
Yeah, it's something that I see. I don't know if I'm going to develop it, but like, it seems like maybe I will. I don't know.
Wow. You know, the chair, Corey Good and David Wilcock talk about that chair. There are these chairs where there is a whole room, and the people, they sit in the chair and they can see everything from this chair, and they monitor. I don't know, I'll have to go back and watch that, but there are these chairs that Wilcock talks about.
Well, you mentioned that one of the beings was a golden triangle headed alien, and I'd never heard of that, but I Googled it, and sure enough, they're the golden triangle alien race.
Go figure, your stuff is Googleable.
Okay, so hold on. This whole story, you did an aside. We were talking about you doing this really cool experience with Allison, and you said, well, let me tell you about this experience. So go back to, you're starting this QHHT with Allison, and you're like, it was so cool.
Right. So here's what happened. So we go in, and first I'm a little kid, and there was an experience I had with a little kid that I think made me think that I was stupid. And it turned out that found out that that was actually something bad that some people did, and so they treated me different. And I grew up with this different treatment because of what I'd seen when I was a little kid.
As Cole.
Yeah, but I was like 3 years old, and I shouldn't have been there when it was going down, and I was. So after that, they would talk to me different, you know, just to make sure that I was cool or whatever. So anyway, that affected me, and it was weird because when we went through that, I was like, oh, well, maybe there was something in my life, but I didn't think there was because I had forgotten all about that. But anyway, so then after that, we went to, I was just baselined. I was sort of geosynchronous orbit in space. She's like, where are you now? And I'm like, this is where I'm at. And I'm like, yeah, we could go anywhere on the planet if you want. And she's like, she asked me some questions about the planet and how I felt about it and stuff. And I answered those questions. And then she asked about space, how I feel about that. And what was weird is that I've never had a feeling that space was some kind of restricted zone until then. And so this Allison's thing also has to do with your soul purpose, right? So the information that I got from her was different. So it was like, I told her space feels thick. I don't know why, but it feels dense, like denser than if you were to go to Earth. It feels harder to go into space. And then she's like, okay, well, is there anything out there that is interesting, you know, that is calling you? And I said, well, there's these lights. There's these white lights that are past the asteroid belt out there, like past our solar system, that look interesting. And she's like, okay, well, can you go to those? And I said, yeah, I can go to those, but there seems to be some kind of barrier right at the asteroid belt. And but I'm like, okay, I can still kind of go there, but I can't, seems like I can't communicate with them normally. And she's like, well, maybe they don't communicate normally. And so we talked about that for a while, about how they communicate and trying to get closer and closer to them. Eventually I saw 3 beings in this ball of light, and they were like standing at the bottom of it. And then the tall one, there was a tall one, and there was sort of like a medium one and a little one. And I was like, this is weird. It seems like there's a dad, a mom, and a kid. And then it came about that the feeling is that I was maybe a family member that they're sent to Earth. I don't know, but that's kind of what the feeling was. But I couldn't get communication, couldn't get a clear piece of information. I also got some information that, or feeling, whatever, that the little one was coming soon next. And that basically they wanted to see if somebody from their vibration could come here and survive and thrive or not. And the feeling I got was everything is good and what I'm doing is good and not to worry. That was kind of the feeling I got. And then she asked, well, she kept asking more questions, and I would ask the questions, and they said, look, if you really want to know, you need to talk to these beings that are in the asteroid belt. And then so I got a feeling for these yellow triangle head beings. And then she said, I said, okay, I can talk to these guys. They seem to be, they can communicate with the white beings, and they can communicate with us. And so I can ask them questions. So she said, okay, let's ask them some questions. So when I first started saying, okay, like what's going on? I basically asked them, what's my purpose here? Why am I here? As soon as I asked that, this like table came in where there was these gentlemen sitting at it, like in military outfit. And I was like, oh, that's strange. I didn't tell Allison at that time because I just wanted to focus on the yellow guys, but it was odd. And they just kind of were sort of hovering there and kind of on the side, like they wanted to witness what was going to be said. And maybe there's, I don't know, who knows, maybe there's some kind of agreement. But anyway, so then, yeah.
Raise my hand. You say that those were like the Galactic Council, or do you think they were from there?
Yeah, either Earth Council or Earth Military or could have been other beings too. I just could see that they sort of looked professional and business type folks in suits or military garb.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so then the triangle headed beings started telling me like that the white beings want to communicate with us, and they can't, because when the asteroid belt formed, it was like this really big explosion, and that explosion basically knocked out our communication with them, because maybe it was a low frequency. I'm just guessing now because I'm taking it a little bit further, but that maybe it was some type of low frequency vibration that's still echoing right now, making it hard for us to communicate with those beings. So he said, yeah, you can't communicate with them. We can tell you, but basically when the asteroid belt formed, that stopped. We stayed to try to help reestablish communication. And there's other beings that are sort of running your lives, I guess, or souls. Sort of waiting for you guys to get out of it. So there's a group of maybe aliens that are sort of managing us while we figure out how to reconnect with these sort of higher frequency beings. And then I said, okay, so what am I supposed to do? And he said, you should create an orb. And I was like, oh, what? You know, and he's like, yeah, there used to be on Earth a communication device that is now beneath the surface, where it would allow people to communicate with those beings after the asteroid belt was formed. And now it's no longer on the surface. And so those beings, the white beings, would like to have that back on the surface. And so, you know, we've been sending all kinds of information to you to sort of prepare you to have enough confidence that you could try to do this. And so that's why you've gotten all these images. That's why you've had all these experiences and these pieces of technology, or seen yourself as a scientist on different planets or in Earth's past, to try to give you the information, you know, enough information to feel like, okay, you can handle this. So I was like, all right, well, how do I, you know, do this? And Allison asked a bunch of questions, and it turned out that, like, I have some kind of connection with this orb frequency, and they basically kind of stuck it on me at that moment in time. So it's like I can access it now, even though it's not finished. So I can sort of get psychic information from trying to align myself with that orb light, which is white, same type of light that we saw, that I saw the beings in on the other side, in some other solar system. And so then she asked, well, how's he supposed to do this actually, you know? And so they said, well, he has an experiment in his basement. He needs to start changing that experiment to work on, to be an orb. And so I had this plan actually to make a light bulb out of it. That was kind of one of the ideas that I had, this kind of weird light. But then I stopped that and I was doing something else. I had this plan, all these things. I ordered all these parts. They were just sitting in my garage, not collecting dust, a lot of dust. It had been like 6 months or maybe longer. Anyway, so they said, yeah, he needs to go back to that plan and activate that plan and follow through with it. And, you know, that there'd be some dangers and stuff like that, but that would be the way to do it. And then she said, well, what's the benefit of, you know, the people on Earth if Cole were to do that? And he said, well, what it'll do is it allow, first, some people just see this flashy light and they'll feel like something, you know, it'll activate some people, and people will want to come, they'll want to visit Cole, they'll want to see the experiment, they'll want to experience it, and that'll sort of propel it. And then he'll be able to make it into this white light, like match the frequency of those beings. And when that happens, you'll be able to see them in there. So people will go and they'll see some beings like in there. And then time will go by, and then more of these orbs will start showing up on the planet, and more people will start working on it. And somebody will figure out how to, you'll be able to talk, or not talk, but you'll be able to psychically connect with the beings that you see. And then eventually somebody will figure out how to get somebody to walk through this light. And here's the other weird thing about this. Okay, and then let's just take this one to the end. So eventually those beings will be traveling back and forth to Earth. Earth will have raised its frequency because more and more people will be trying to do this and connecting and having these experiences. And then there'll be thousands of them on the planet, and eventually the planet will be able to reconnect, like on a pretty big scale. The other weird thing about this is that I've been working on this even before this happened, that I wanted to make sure it didn't create anything harmful for humans. I don't know why, but I just felt like, well, because I was exposed to it. So I was like, I don't want to be exposed to anything bad, like ozone or various radiations, which usually happens when you follow our current line of kind of plasma technology processing. It creates all kinds of nasty things. You wouldn't want to be anywhere near it. So for this, I was like, for some reason, I was like, no, I'm going like natural on this. I'm going, I want to be able to stick my hand in there. I want to be able to be exposed to it. So that was my whole thing, wanting to keep it where it was kind of a frequency that we could interact with, and materials. Like one of the things I was thinking was, I'll put all kinds of crazy acids in there and go nuts, right? And I was like, no, let's stick with water. Let's stick with noble metals, and then it should be it just should be the higher, purest form of what this could be. And there's lots of scientists working on this, but they're using these chemicals. They're using not noble metals because they're really interested in two things. One is this low energy nuclear reaction process, which is the old cold fusion name. 30 years later, people have found a lot of information about it, really interesting stuff. And then some other people are trying to figure out how these ball lightning is formed. And so people have been working with that. And so one of the things that I came up with was, I think that these ley lines have some type of noble metal in there, and they create like a capacitor, a localized capacitor. When lightning comes down and hits that local area, because there might be water vapor around, you get this ball of lightning that forms, and then it just sits over these conductive areas until it decides there's not enough energy anymore, the capacitance dissipates, and then it disappears. So that was one of the other things I was doing with my experiment, where I have the foil, is I was able to make this sort of like ball lightning sort of just sit there. But anyway, that's not really what I'm doing this about. But yeah, so that's how this kind of got going. And ever since then, I also decided that I wanted to tell Allison everything about what I was doing, which is not normal, because scientists usually tend to be very to themselves and secretive and worried about, patents and all kinds of stuff like that. And I was like, no, I think this is different. I'm just going to tell her and see, what she thinks. I didn't think anything would actually come of that, but it did. She started meditating, and she would find me in the future, and then I would tell her more. And then she would come back and she would tell me. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so, like, I'm seeing this information, like what you're telling me, if I apply it to what I understand about the sciences, I can actually find literature on really, really small devices that are like this, that scientists are working on. And maybe what I'm doing is just a really large version of, say, like a quantum dot antenna, for example, or a quantum dot light source. It's just a macro one. But that's yet to be determined, but that's what it seems like. Because she said that she saw like this sort of like shell where light was kind of beaming upwards, and there were these plates and stuff. And I was kind of like, huh, it's very possible that that's what you need to do to make sort of like a macro quantum dot. So that's kind of where my head's at right now.
Okay, wait. So she tunes in and can go down the timeline and grab the information that is not yet available to you and has not occurred to you. And if I recall, her background is a CPA, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then she brings that info back to you, and which sparks another trail of success. Yes?
Yes. It's been successful. As I apply that, it's successful. I go and talk to myself, but I'm quiet. Like, I don't talk that much. I'll go there and I'll see, okay, this experiment's successful. There's all this stuff going on. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. How'd you do it? And he's like, yeah, no, I worked on it. And that's all I get from myself.
I lived with you, but not with Allison.
But what a cool synergy that you have with Allison, that you guys can work in tandem like this, and to develop this light that's sort of like almost like a crystal ball or some kind of plasma connection to these white light beings. Do we know much about these white light beings? I know you said they're love. It's amazing, but do we know who, where, how they are? What is that?
I don't really know, okay, but I have my suspicions, because like I said, I couldn't communicate with them. So maybe at some point I'll know for sure, but I couldn't communicate with them, so I don't really know what they are, but I have a feeling they're either like our soul parents, or maybe there are actually our soul that wants to communicate with us. Like, you know, when you do these kind of your chakra meditations, you know, there's these different levels you can get to. There's 6, there could be 12, and there could be all this other information. It's sort of like somebody explained, like there's this huge information load above your head, and then some stuff trickles in. But where's that all coming from? You know, there might be a being, it might be you somewhere else sending you stuff, or a future person. I'm not sure, but I'll tell you. Recently, I did another meditation just yesterday, and I kind of went at it a little bit different than I normally do, and I popped out of an orb into my lab, and I was there in the future, and he's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And I was like, "Oh, what's going on here? You've taken this thing pretty far." And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, you need to ask me some questions real quick because Allison's coming." And I was like, okay. So I asked him, you know, what the device was and stuff, and he showed me the future vision of it, what I'm supposed to do. But then so I left. I came back in another time period, and I was in the past. I decided to go to the past to see if anything was blocking me from going forward. So it was in the past, and there was this orb. And it was the size, it was like maybe a story, like a whole building kind of size. It was large. And there was a bunch of people working on it. It was like in a circular room, all kinds of electronics. And people were going in, and then eventually it became my turn to go in, and I kind of touched it, and you kind of get a little bit of electric discharge when you touch the sort of light water particles. And so then I went in. And then when I got in there, it was like a stairway up. And then like you walk up this stairway, and then you get to the top, and then there's people you know, and you kind of talk to them, and then they let you through, and you keep going. So that was my experience from the past that I was supposed to see in order to keep going now. But I don't know if that
went
tells
back
me.
to see that. I would have thought that would have, you know, all these different versions of timelines. It's really,
That's what it's gonna, yeah.
you can get kind of a mind trip to them. But I was really, after we were talking about the asteroid belt, and I Googled it, and it's between Mars and Jupiter. It's a huge part of our solar system. And some people were saying it's maybe a planet didn't have enough gravitational force to form, but you're saying maybe there was a planet that exploded. There was another planet in our solar system that exploded, and that created some kind of density between there and the sun that is somehow keeping our vibration lower, and we're meant to expand it. And this orb is somehow this bridge to teach us, for us to resonate with, to expand it.
That's right.
That's kind of my understanding of what you said.
That's absolutely right.
I mean, you talk about that there was a net put around us, and it kind of it acted as sort of the veil, but it also it protects us from other undesirable things coming in, but that those are going away, that the net is on its way down. And actually what they said, they were big blue orbs. Again, I think this is
Yeah, you're talking about Corey Good.
Yeah.
I don't know about any of that. I'll from what I understand, okay, if there was a huge explosion, let's say we had communication with some other solar system, and then our solar system had a huge explosion, we would lose communication for some time, right? Yeah. While that kind of explosion did whatever it was going to do. I mean, it happens all the time on Earth. So you just have a hurricane and you lose communication, right? So from what I understand, that's what it is. It's not that somebody put anything there. It was a disaster. There were three intelligent beings on this planet. There was these yellow ones, blue beings, and then these sort of like grasshopper type peeps. But anyway, when it exploded, then the yellow beings stayed here. But basically, yeah, we got some like probably subspace damage that has it could be permanent around between the asteroid belt and the sun. So basically, any planets that are within that range are going to have a hard time communicating backwards to people outside of the asteroid belt. And possibly because there's so many people on the planet who are kind of, good folks and spiritual and want to have these communications and are working and trying and been doing this for years and years and years, that maybe some of that veil is breaking down and harder for it to keep stable. It's almost like a bubble. When a bubble's grown too big, it starts to wobble and then eventually pops.
Yeah. Well, so it seems like recently, I know this past weekend, man, I was jacked up, and I looked at I looked at what was going on. I think we talked about this with the electromagnetic field, and we have had, what is it? It's the K. Anyway, it starts with a K. Anyway,
Sorry, no.
On Earth,
Yeah.
it affects me. I mean, this is coming from, what is it? NOAA. Their website. So I mean, it's an official website. It's this
Right.
flare, but it seems a little different. It's a different type of flares that hit the Earth, and it really messes with me. And I mean, if it messes with me, I'm sure it messes with a lot of folks. And I find that interesting. And it's coming from the sun, right? And didn't they just find a huge hole? Everybody's been talking about the fact that they took down these different, like they watched the sun. And
With Soho, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know what that's about. I mean,
Yeah, there was going to be a solar flare, and then they shut down Soho so you couldn't see it. So there's some weird stuff going on, I think, with the sun that people, or well, the groups that are actually able to get the data, for whatever reason, aren't able to share. I've talked to some scientists, and that's a huge argument point right there. But when I've just went out and astro traveled to the sun, I got that there's portals. It's easy. You just get over there and you fly right in, and then you pop out somewhere else, like the Pleiades or wherever you want to go. And that's what I get from it. So I don't know. And a lot of times you see these objects that appear to be going in and out of the sun, or at least into it, and sometimes out. And I just feel like, yeah, that's probably what it is. I don't know.
Well,
Nobody's been able to make a sun here, and I argue with some physicists about that, and they tell me all kinds of technical reasons why they can't do it. But scientists have been working on trying to make a little mini in the lab sun for decades, and they just can't.
Isn't that what this orb is that you're creating? Sort of?
Well, it's so the technology is coming from the particles that are hitting the sun. So in that aspect, there's some similarities, but I don't know. Since I don't know what the sun really is, I can't say. But I am producing this light that's sort of like a solar flare type light, and I'm going to be trying to control that and be trying to diffuse it and create more white light out of it. Basically broadband the light frequency, split it up. So right now, light comes in from the sun, hits our atmosphere, and you get white light. And then you can split it up and get colors. This light that's coming off of my experiment is colors. So I just need to reverse that, diffuse it, and you should be able to get it whitened.
Okay, so I'm going to see if I can say this. You were saying that the elements that are in the sun are changing, or we're in a different part of the universe where the elements are changing, and now we're getting into the more metals that are in the ice that are reacting with the sun.
Noble metals.
Yeah, the noble metals, which are metals that don't oxidize, like gold and silver, and you named a few. They produce a certain type of energy when they have this reaction. And that's what you're replicating in your experiments, and you're working with silver, and then you're going to be starting working with gold and trying to replicate this reaction hopefully safely in your lab. And you have a Patreon site. I wanted you to plug your Patreon site. If people want to help support all these experiments, they can come to see videos and kind of follow along with your story here.
Right. It's going to take me some time to get to where I want to be. And the other thing is that it's not my full-time job. So this is kind of something I work on when I can't sleep. And it's basically the goal would be to try to keep the anode and cathode from degrading too much. Well, this is going on because gold doesn't oxidize. The other noble metals have oxidation states, but they're harder to get to. So that's one of the reasons why, like if you take a noble metal and you apply a bunch of energy to it, it'll just keep absorbing it. And then finally it'll go, same thing happens with helium. The helium has a really high temperature constant, because what'll happen is you start heating it up and it won't react. So it just keeps the heat coming in. And then eventually it gives off, it finally releases an electron. And then that is really, really powerful plasma. So if you want to jack up your plasmas, you put helium in there, and then you can really get a lot more energy locally to whatever other chemistries you might have in there. So this is kind of what's happening. So that's why when we're going through this part of the solar system where we have more of these noble metals being hit to the sun, it dies down because they're not able to react. You see the sun kind of quieting. And then every once in a while, you get an ice chunk with some of this noble metal in there. And now you've got water, which is reactant, and you've got the noble metal. And so the noble metal excites those water, oxygen, and hydrogen particles. And then it just, and that's where you get this really big release. So it makes sense to me, but I don't know if that's actually going on, but there's the premise.
Hypothesis.
Yeah. Okay, so I know, and I think it's Love One. They talk about, I think that's where this comes from. They talk about the Sumerians and how, like, all of the stuff that happened, like they came down and they mined for gold here, and I'm wondering if that's why I think you know about that, right? I mean, that's
yeah, of course I know all about that. I've never researched the only thing I understand is that like gold has a lot of spiritual value to it. So maybe they were using it to, have more of these experiences by being around it more. But because again, gold doesn't really react. It also reflects the sun's rays just amazingly. You can put it on the back side of a solar panel, and then any of the light that would normally not get absorbed by the solar panel gets pushed back up, and you can recover it. So it's a really good way of making high efficiency solar cells. People also use these quantum dots, which can also be silver or aluminum or gold, or quantum rods, which do the same thing. It's very expensive, so most people wouldn't have a solar cell that has that. But that's one thing that definitely gold does. It reflects sunlight really well. And then the other elements seem to be, you can activate them to create some type of light or something. I'm not really sure. I guess we'll find out.
Gosh, it's so exciting. I mean, I'm just really excited to follow your, maybe years or decades, I don't know, but to follow your story and see what you develop and, how it can be applied and how it can help humanity and mankind. I mean,
yeah, the other thing the reason why I wanted to kind of come out with this is because I wanted to be able to say, hey, this seems really like valuable, like the work that Allison's doing. She connects you with your soul purpose, and then you get that information, what you should be doing on this planet. And since most people are just going to get like, okay, be a better wife or be a better husband or do some work or maybe do some painting or whatever, it's kind of hard to quantify it and say, hey, this is, you're able to actually prove that this works, right? So I think my thing is a little bit closer because I got a piece of hardware I'm supposed to make, right? So if I can make that hardware and it supposedly does what they said it does, which sounds beneficial, then okay, then I think, it puts more weight behind the kind of work that Allison's doing. I feel like that's an important thing to do. So for me, that's the most, that's just almost as important as what this thing's actually supposed to do, is to give people more faith that they can go and talk to their higher selves and get these directions, act on those, and, be in a better place in their life and actually be doing what they're supposed to be doing. Because from what I understand, if you aren't able to do that, then you just have to come back here and start all over.
Right.
So we might as well do it.
Well, and that is the thing that when I spoke with her, she sent me an interview you did with
Yeah. Was it Blake Cousins, Third Phase of the Moon?
Yes, and it was great. But I believe it was last year, and during it you were saying, I don't know what I'm doing with this. It's this really cool thing, and now it's okay. I know what I'm doing with this. I don't. You may not know all the way down. You have your ideas, but you have a much better understanding. I mean, I can just see that between then and now. So that's really cool. And I have to say, man, you know, we tend to, you know, I always have to do this. I'm right brain, husband's left brain, and together we come together. But I see you and I see her the same way. It's like you're both. You are so completely both. You paint, you design, you're spiritual, you meditate, and you're over here, and you're willing to be honest about it. I mean, there are a lot of folks that wouldn't be honest about it. They would do that in secret. So, man, yeah.
But that's the other thing that we feel like we're finding out, Allison and I, is that the more we're honest and open and sort of come from our heart, the more information comes faster, the more relative it is. If you don't do that, we seem to get stuck and delayed. And so it's a really different sort of dichotomy that I'm used to, because I'm used to being to myself and whatever, you know, like you said, most people, especially scientists, would be. But in this case, it just feels like that's not the path for this. So her cousin saw the orb, or saw the light flashy things, right? And it's Patreon/orb, the orb.
So Patreon/the orb is what
right. You can see it. There's a free one. It's very short, but it's free. You can just go on there and see. You don't have to sign up for my Patreon. But the more that we sort of like follow our heart on this, the more information is coming, the faster it's being developed. And then, okay, so her cousin saw it, and then the next day, Allison called me. She said, "Hey, I want you to talk to my cousin. She had a dream of the orb last night." So I said, "Okay, what did you see?" Because I had been thinking about doing something, but I hadn't told anybody yet. And she goes, "Oh, I see. I saw it was the orb. It was at night, and there was a beam shooting out of it into the sky." And I was like, "Oh, damn it! You can't keep a secret with these psychic people around, you know." That's exactly what I'm now working on. You know, is trying to get it to beam upwards. So
let's stop right there. No, let's stop right there.
I
want to protect you a little bit. Can we put a lid on that one? Few of the show.
Well, you're talking about being open and honest and loving and that intimacy. It's you were saying when we talked earlier that's one of the applications you saw for the orb is that like couples can meditate with that light and kind of create that.
Yeah, I did this future meditation, and all of a sudden I was at this sort of like a compound. There was a room in there. It was circular, and in the center was an orb, and it was giving off this beautiful light. And then couples would come in there, and they would sort of like hold hands and lay at a little bit of an angle so they could see the orb while they were sort of like meditating together. And it was like a thing. I think people would do that, and it would uplift them and give them more love for each other. I don't know, but that was the feeling I got when I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, that's super special."
You were nice. You're in a show, right?
Yeah. So that's maybe where it's going.
How do we know that it's not some sort of a portal and it brings you to a vibrational match, and that through that you can go anywhere for people that maybe can't access that on their own?
That's basically what they said. They didn't say like everybody's going to want to be talking to these white folks, that there's going to be other people that, you know, people are going to want to have experiences with, other beings of high vibration they're going to have experiences with, and this will sort of allow them to do that. Yeah. And then the other thing was, it was funny because Allison said, "Oh, the other day I was kind of feeling a little bit down, and I asked for like some kind of sign or something like that, and the orb went into her, and then just went like everywhere out of her, you know, extremities and stuff." And she was like, it was the most powerful experience I've ever felt before. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Maybe I should try that.
Well, I was saying, I've said this often, we accept all this sort of sci-fi stuff in entertainment in Star Trek and Star Wars, and I just watched H.G. Wells' Time Machine, where he developed this light machine that took him back and forth in time. And we kind of just take it all as entertainment, but what if it's an actual reality that we are stepping into? I mean, this is the science fiction becoming actual fiction.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's got me completely hooked. So
yeah, do you sleep at night, or is your mind just trying to think about this stuff and work on it?
Last night I did everything I could not to go down there last night and try and get some sleep, but I didn't get much.
Yeah, I was telling my kids that, and my oldest kid said, "Why does he not take Benadryl, or can he take something?" I don't think
it doesn't work.
It
Drugs
really
don't work anymore. No, I used to be on that, like Ambien, and then all of a sudden it stopped working, and I was like, fuck, like what am I supposed to do? I went to my sleep doctor and did all kinds of tests, and he's like, I don't know. It's kind of like I hit this when you don't sleep a lot, your body goes into sort of like this hypermetabolism, and then doesn't matter. Like everything's a waste. If you give me codeine, you give me Ambien, Valiums, it's just a waste of medicine to give me because doesn't
That's so interesting. Okay, another play. I'm going to take us on a different tangent. You had that dream to build that flying UFO, and I know you're working on a flying car concept.
Oh yeah,
talk about
that's
that
right.
at all? I mean, you're getting there.
Yes, yeah. I started playing around with these duct fan type devices in my garage, and I didn't really like what I was seeing, and so then I started contacting some flying car companies because there's a lot of them up here in the Bay Area, and I just said, hey, if you guys are interested, I'd like to get involved. So I got involved with this company. It's called Flight Aerospace, and he developed a flying sort of like he calls it a bike, but it's really it's a really small version where there's multiple there's 12 propellers around your body, and then what it does is it allows you to fly 360 degrees. So a lot of the ones that are being released right now, these sort of like hover drones, they sort of go up and then they fly a little bit like an airplane or a helicopter, and they come down. This one doesn't do that. It's more like the Jetsons, where it can go any which way you want. And so it really just feels good. Feels good to me. So I kind of decided to work with Ansel and on that, and it's been going really well. We're just about really ready to release the next vehicle, which is going to be a buggy, and it'll be able to fly. Right now, it'll fly for about 45 minutes with just batteries and about 500 pounds of lift. So, I mean, you could basically go somewhere, maybe go to the grocery store, buy some stuff, and come back. And recently we had a client contact us that is wanting to have a 2-seater and then have a gas generator generating power for the batteries. And that would allow you to fly for over an hour at 150 miles an hour. And then he's like, I want to just take off from my house and I want to land at a gas station, fill her up, and then fly away. And then we're like, well, that's kind of illegal. You can't do that. He's like, I don't care.
You change the laws of flight and driving and air traffic. I mean, it's going to change everything when that gets.
Yeah. And in the future, I saw that the orb is powering it at some point in the future.
Yeah, this light generator, because that's a clean energy. You were saying you're trying to harness you're trying to keep it really clean.
Yeah, well, what happens right now is that a lot of the gas escapes. So I can't really, there's a couple of things you can't do with it. One is you can't really recycle everything because everything is not completely contained. If it were, because it's noble and it's water, basically you should be able to run this thing for a long time at some point in the future. So right now I'm not doing that. I did try to do that and exploded. So I've decided to hold off on that. I need to find something. There's some experimental chemical vessels that are made out of quartz that supposedly might be able to handle a blast in them. And that's what I'm going to be trying to do later when I get.
Oh my gosh.
So propulsion, though, isn't propulsion, everything I keep seeing about the future, there is not a need for propulsion, that it's all linked in with our frequency. I mean, I realize there's a big step that has to go between here and there.
But using our electromagnetic field.
And you're compatible with the craft and all of that. I mean.
Yeah, so we have to get to the point where we can have better thought-based equipment. So it's kind of funny because when I had mentioned to Allison that I saw this compound, and there was people were doing this meditation in this kind of domey room, and I was kind of like, yeah, you might have to protect that thing, and then I can break out some of the stuff I was working on. And she's like, no, you're not doing that. You're not doing that. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do then to protect us? She says, we're going to protect it with love. And I go, okay, I'm going to make a love beam then. So I decided that I bought this equipment where potentially you could take some of her clients, and when they contact their higher spiritual self, we might be able to record some type of frequency emitted from that. Or maybe you work with some couples and they're super in love, and then maybe we can pick up on that frequency and then create a RF device that just amplifies the hell out of it. So yeah, if somebody does fly over, you shoot it up at them and they fall in love with you and they leave you alone.
I love where you're going with this. So how far down the timeline have you been able to see as far as years?
Yeah, I went to 2050. I was told it was 2050, and
build the UFO by 2050.
Yeah. Well, not the UFO, but so here's where I see. I'm not sure about the UFO right now, because so when I meet certain people, it triggers possibly working on a UFO, and then when I decide I don't want to be with those people anymore, then it kind of goes away. So that's where that kind of is at right now. But right now, what I see is this kind of this sort of hovercraft that has rockets on it, and basically you could go up pretty high into the atmosphere with sort of like a lightweight device, hover device that maybe has a lot of hydrogen in there, kind of bring you up high, and then you kick on these rockets, and then you can go.
Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, that is so cool. Now that what I saw was that on Tatooine, the ship that they fly, and it was on the first Star Wars, and it would hover, and then it had the boosters on it, and it could take off.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big
last Star Wars movie was really strange for me because he has these hover cars that they're in. I feel like that is really close to being released to our society. Like there's a spinning thing on the very front. You could see it. It's like when they're traveling, and I'm like, people have these now. There's a Israeli military company that has this dual fanned. It's like this hover drone, and basically you just put a limiter on that so it can't fly too high, and then you're hovering around on the streets. And so yeah, I felt like that was really kind of just like hit me. And then Alice and I were doing this thing, and she was like, well, see if you can communicate with me or come to me or whatever, And I was like, all right, let me see if I could do that. And all of a sudden this like sort of like portal opened up, and I could see her at her house. And I was like, whoa, I could see you. And she's like, what am I wearing? And asking me all these questions. I was like, yeah, this is a little weird. But and then which is also was in the movie, which I thought is very strange. The solo movie. So who knows what they're putting out there.
When we go to Sedona, right?
What's that?
We're coming to Sedona at the end of September for the name of the conference.
Transformational.
Yes, Transformational Shift Conference.
Thank you. Transformational Shift Conference, and we'll get to see Allison Coe speak. She's going to be up there presenting about QHHT. And
that's right.
To meet you.
Yeah, and she's going to probably show some pictures of the work that I'm doing, and kind of explain how I'm trying to sort of give validity to the work that she's doing. It'll be fun.
So hopefully we'll get to sit down with both of you together live in person That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Interview them.
Well, and maybe at the end of this video, we can show some of your paintings to show, because you've tried to visually represent what's, you know, some of these things that you've had in your dreams with adjusting the light beams and the pyramid and meeting these pictures and creatures.
Yeah, I used to have a website for the paintings, but I kind of have sort of abandoned it right now. But I can send you guys a bunch of painting pictures.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And you're on Facebook also?
I took that down after all of the ruckus that was going on, because I just thought that, it's probably not a good idea for me to be on there.
So Patreon/The Orb is how you can see more of Cole's work and get in touch with him and support this work if it's of interest to you. So I love it that you picked up that phone call off CNN and reached some guy, just plucked him out of nowhere, and just that started this trajectory in your life. So maybe, maybe somebody resonates with this and they're like, that's what I need to be up to.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why we love putting this out here on the Joyride Show, is to just continue this conversation and see what's possible, see what great minds are up to, and combining that, I don't know, that other sixth sense with our five senses, and
10th sense,
creating something that's just, out there. But it's right there. It doesn't feel that out there anymore. After conversations with you, I'm like, oh, when's it going to happen?
No, that's true. And Allison put out a video yesterday, and everything is still out there. It's still, it's
potential.
to come. And that's what you're saying. You're more of the bridge.
Yeah.
And that is, and anyway, and you do spark something. There's something that you carry. There's an imprint that you carry that reminds people.
Go ahead.
If they see the light, they see that, I think they'll get a feeling for it. But yeah, I feel like it's this is maybe going to help kind of attach those concepts that those people had to now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually.
Well,
yeah, the question, like, she's like, well, I don't know when it's going to happen, but they say it's going to happen soon. And I'm like, well, maybe it's happening, but maybe we just don't know who's actually doing it.
Yeah, she's
like me.
About the new Earth and the shift and the new Earth and what it looks like, and that's exactly what you're describing, is this shift in vibration and bringing that to our reality here. Oh, it's so cool. We could talk to you for hours, Cole.
And we are going to.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for your time today. This has been great. We'll put all the links to the Patreon site below the YouTube video so that people can follow along. We'll be very curious.
Yeah, I'll post stuff just about every week unless I'm out of town for a couple weeks.
Okay. That sounds great.
Well, thank you for coming on, and thank you for being on. So it's so funny. Some of the things you said, it was like,
no. I'm saying it with love. We're putting you with a love beam on top of it. Love beam. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on another Joyride. We love having you as part of our tribe. We love to hear from you and share, with other people who are of like mind, who you think need to be in on this conversation. So thank you so much. Thank you, Cole.
Thank you. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye,
See you next week.
Yeah, literally.
Bye, everybody.